WhatsApp group information about Sundays, this coming Sundays, Guru Puja practice. And what we want to add to our Guru Puja practice is the offering of Ganachakra or the feast offering. Of course, this will be a virtual feast offering. But if possible, it is good for this Guru Puja with feast offering for you to set up where you're going to view this, where you're going to do this practice, to be more like the shrine that we recommended for the Lady Panashawari empowerment. We sent some photos, I think, of examples. I can share with you more. This last weekend, we had another Lady Panashawari virtual empowerment, and some people have shared pictures of how they set up their video, set up their iPad, or set up, their laptop or iPad or phone, and with the shrine kind of in the back, right immediately in the back. And so then it's good to prepare for the purposes of the Ganachakra. Basically, a little plate of solids and then an offering of liquids, because they represent the two accumulations of method and wisdom. So these offering substances, these are offerings that are delightful to the senses, offered to the gurus and the objects of refuge. So you want to prepare, something with care, not just like last minute, go find something to offer. Prepare with care. Of course, right now, for some of you, your stay-at-home rules are stricter than others. Then, of course, you just do whatever is possible in terms of preparing some offering. Then for some of us, it's not really that strict. Don't be lazy. All these offerings, ritual practice, these are for our own training, for our benefit, that we are doing this. So anyway, for the Ganachakra, you need a plate of solids, chewables, and then an offering of drinkable beverage. And for Jigten Sumgon Cho or Ganachakra, it explicitly says, do not use meat, because in other Ganachakra offerings, often meat is included. In some cases, some lamas will use just symbolically, or meaning just a little bit of meat, little pieces. And then in some other Ganachakras that I've seen, it's like it's a spread, But in this Ganachakra, it says very explicitly, do not include meat or alcohol in this Ganachakra. So we don't use either meat or alcohol. So this is Sunday, same 9 o'clock. If you can join us, that'll be good. And this is open to other people too, other people so you feel free to join us, send a link to them if they want. So this is for Sunday. Yeah. Then maybe at that time, if we have time, I will say a little bit more about some of the specifics of Ganachakra offering. Some kind of updates. So yesterday I scheduled a Zoom session with the two translators, and I had a good discussion with them how to proceed. And this morning they sent me a proposal of which text to translate next. So we agreed that they're going to translate a text called The Practice of Mahamudra, the Heart Essence of the Dakinis. This text is also short. They're all short. This one is short, but this one was composed in prose rather than verses. So in a way, easier to translate because, you know, all the particles are there, as opposed to verse where they lop off, you know, syllables and particles, and the translator have to kind of guess what's going on. So it's in prose, and then at the end there is a summary in a verse, in stanzas, and so they think that that should be a nice one to work on next. We talked about, you know, future plans, the bigger picture plan for this project, and they also said that they are going to do a very quick translation of the table of contents for this whole collection of public teachings, so that I, you know, can have an overview of like what are all the different titles in there. And then, because we need to be choosing titles beyond the 9. They also said that they have encountered, not surprisingly, one text that they first started to translate, mistakenly, actually. One of them said to the other, okay, let's do number whatever. But he mistakenly gave that number. And then very quickly they discovered that there's this particular text is using some kind of animal that is obscure, at least to us, using that as an analogy for many things in that particular teaching. And so they're like, we don't even know what this animal is. And so we don't know, you know, what it's alluding to. The comparisons being made, you know, between Mahamudra, you know, how to practice Mahamudra, and the animal, you know, and it's just like unclear, you know, what animal, and also unclear who is giving whom instructions, whether it's like, you know, a rhetorical, like, you know, like, oh, people practice this, meaning don't do this. Instead, you should be doing this. So it was unclear to them. So definitely there were some challenges. And so I said to them, I said, even these 9 titles, let's not, you know, let's not translate them, any of these 9 titles, if it's quite clear that it's very tricky. Because it's not like we are fixed on these 9. This is just what Khenchen Rinpoche kind of said, oh, I've marked, you know, some of the teachings that I thought was interesting, and y'all can see if you can get people to translate that. So we're not wedded to them. Then I informed His Holiness. Then His Holiness said that he heard that somebody in Europe might be working on these, but as a whole entire collection. So that kind of gave me a little pause, like, oh, then should we do it? After a little thought about it, I was like, no, we should do it, because God knows, you know, how long it's going to take for them to translate like the whole gamut. And so I feel that, you know, we should continue. But I'm going to find out, you know, like, is it the case that somebody or a group of people are working on the entire collection, which is like hundreds and hundreds of texts. So I want to find out if that's the case. So we'll see. But in any case, His Holiness said, you know, it's good, you know, whatever you're working on, he says it's good, but find out, you know, what these other people might be doing. Then also, I'm now editing and fixing a translation of a praise in verses, in stanzas, known as the 10 Directions and 3 Times. It is a praise that Sherab Jungne wrote, praising praying, supplicating Kyobpa Rinpoche. It's quite a famous supplication. So I'm working on that. It's been fun. Kind of getting, like understanding the nuances and things like that, and making it into like understandable English. I think that's important as well. Anyway, that's progress report on translation stuff. So now,
I have a question.
Oh yeah, sure.
When we are studying Gongchik, and well, this is a text that was composed by the disciples of Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon. And then now, but now you say that this other that the translators are translating, these are the words of Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon, no?
Yes.
That Jigten Sumgon wrote by himself. But you just say that it's a collection. It means that it's a big volumes or a lot of texts that Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon wrote.
Not necessarily that he wrote, but that he taught, and then probably Sherab Jungne or somebody right there wrote it down.
Yeah.
Like Buddha, like Buddha's sutras. Buddha never wrote. Ananda remembered things. So I think maybe I understand a little bit what you're asking. Between Gongchik and say this collection called Sokche, right? Gongchik, Sherab Jungne kind of kept as a secret for a longer time.
Why?
I'm not sure, It said that he left, to go in retreat in Kailash for like 7 years or something like that, or even 10 years. And it was during that time that he started to kind of review, everything he heard from Kyobpa Rinpoche. And then he identified these Vajra statements. Whereas the Sokche was part of the collected works of Jigten Sumgon that was compiled fairly, that was compiled and published very soon after Kyobpa Rinpoche's passing. Because there's this. I think at that time, many great lamas and their disciples, as the lamas are getting older, the disciples are already preparing like their kambum, meaning collected works. So the Sokche was Sokche and other things. Sokche is this collection of many teachings called the public teachings. Was probably already quite known, kind of circulating in some form, even before Kyobpa Rinpoche passed. Whereas the Gongchik, in the form that it is, was unknown, I think, I know, the historians say, unknown to all the other disciples. It's something that was only Sherab Jungne, kind of. So I can imagine, I don't have the evidence, I can imagine that when Sherab Jungne first came out with this, probably there were some, disciples of Kyobpa Rinpoche that was uncomfortable. Like, we don't know, like these statements like this, one statement like this. I think there was probably some resistance to that. But, we also know that Sherab Jungne, Kyobpa Rinpoche really trusted his understanding. And that's indisputable. And so I think part of like other people's suspicion, later, or discomfort, maybe slightly also to do with, they were a little jealous of how, Kyobpa Rinpoche clearly, respected Sherab Jungne's understanding. So it's not like Sherab Jungne appeared from nowhere and claimed, Kyobpa Rinpoche taught this. They already saw, the last, I don't know, towards, they say, as Kyobpa Rinpoche got older, Sherab Jungne taught by sitting in front, and then there's a curtain, and Kyobpa Rinpoche sat behind. And so Kyobpa Rinpoche knew, everything that Sherab Jungne was teaching on behalf of him. And then they say like, even before that, before this, you know, when Kyobpa Rinpoche would rest in behind a curtain, even before that, you know, Kyobpa Rinpoche would teach, and then halfway, maybe he's tired, or maybe he wants to check and see how Sherab Jungne understood him or not. It said that he would just look over to Sherab Jungne and he will stop, and Sherab Jungne understood that he is to continue the teaching, and Sherab Jungne will start. And then Kyobpa Rinpoche would just sit there and listen. So basically, Sherab Jungne and Kyobpa Rinpoche, you know, from our perspective, is of one mind. And so then the Gongchik, in a way, you could say, is a distillation of everything in the collected works into this essence statements, Vajra statements.
Okay.
So
Thank
they're
you.
potent. They're potent, but they're also very hard to penetrate, you know, like Vajra. Hard. Vajra, one of the qualities of Vajra is hardness, you know, and powerful. Very hard to penetrate also.
One small question more about this animal that you said is not unknown.
Yeah.
And also His Holiness, and nobody knows about this, or is a mythical?
Oh no! This is just these two young men, you know. Like I have no idea what it means, you know. Yeah. No, just these two young men, you know.
Yeah, but it would be nice not to know.
Right. I mean, they say, you know, we also talked about like who they can consult, and we discussed that, you know. So we came up with some people that they could consult with, you know, and ask, you know, like what this means. At a future point, I want, you know, before all of this was happening, in my discussions with Kenjen Rinpoche, one of the projects we want to start is that at this new house that he's going to live in medicine, we're going to conduct these like close readings of these teachings, where you need to know some basic Tibetan at the very least. You need to be committed to, you know, translating these teachings. Then you can come to study with Rinpoche for like 10 days or 2 weeks, where every morning you'll come for a few hours and everybody sit around a table. The day before, you know, a section of this text will be assigned and you have to come up with your translation. And Rinpoche will ask every person, you know, you read yours, you read yours, you read yours. This is how we do close readings in graduate school. I introduced that format to Rinpoche, and Rinpoche said, oh yeah, that'll be nice to do. And so then, you know, then slowly, by the end of like these 2 weeks, you know, a particular text will be completed. And then we have the translation. So that was the original plan before this zombie apocalypse turned up. And so now everybody is, you know, inside afraid of zombies. Then we got to do it another way, you know. Then I thought, you know, let me just find, you know, people that I know that I work well with, and I know the quality of the Tibetan. These two young men, one of them is Drigum, but translating more Rinchen Punsok's things. Rinchen Punsok is the 17th successor to Kyobpa Rinpoche's throne. And it tends to be more kind of Dzogchen influence, you know, Nyingma things, although Rinchen Punsok was, you know, very educated in Gongchik as well. But this young man mostly has been doing Rinchen Punsok stuff. Then the other young man, which actually knows more Tibetan, and he's the one that's married to Eastern Amdo woman, and they just have a kid. He's from Asheville, so he's more Nyingma. His teacher is Pacho Rinpoche, but his Tibetan is really good. In that at conferences and seminars, he can translate from English back to Tibetan for a Tibetan audience. That's really not easy. Most of the translators I know cannot do that kind of translation. They can translate into their native language, but the reverse translation is really hard. But other person. So yes, so then the first person, Sean, who has contact, with Dugong people, he is consulting some of them, like when they have difficulties, like the passage or something like that. So yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So last time we met, we basically finished the Nimanangwa's commentary, right, for statement 1 of chapter 1, the one that we dissected, the Tibetan. Then Sobish provides these notes, and on the physical book, this is page 50, starting there. So here, just briefly, Sobish says that the idea that the Dharma that the Buddha taught exists independent from Buddhas. So whether Buddhas appear or not, the Dharma that the Buddhas have taught remains true, because it is the nature of things. And this is not created by Buddhas. So Sobish quotes some Pali texts to show how this is a very old idea. Then, of course, I think some of us who are quite familiar with these sources, these Pali sources, to us, it's like, yeah, of course, that's how we've always understood it. It also sort of shows, that sometimes in Tibet, some very basic kind of framework might be missing for some of them. Clearly enough for this to warrant a statement, to make very explicit. Like, hey, as great as we say Buddhas are, and we do all these praises of the Buddhas, how great they are, how wonderful they are, how all-knowing they are, how greatly compassionate they are, and all these things, Sometimes, I think people turn them into like God with a capital G, and think, oh, Buddhists do whatever they want, and that the Dharma is dependent on Buddhists. But no, the Dharma is not something created by Buddhists, but the Dharma is what Buddhists realized, and in that way became Buddhas, and as Buddhas taught that to us. Mm. 51. Yeah. Whether or not Tathagatas arise, the nature of the factors, suchness, reality, truth is constant. Buddha likened his discovery of the Dharma to the rediscovery of a city hidden in the jungle. So Chodrat says, since the Buddha did not create, but instead the Buddha awakened to the Dharma, then, quote, he is not a supreme agent like a divine magician or a creator God. Then, Sobish gives us some context that Kyobpa Rinpoche often uses this expression, the inevitable effectiveness of virtue and non-virtue. The fact that Buddhas cannot change the fundamental nature. And the fundamental nature is virtue and non-virtue are never confused. And so he uses this phrase, inevitable effectiveness of virtue and non-virtue. So Sobish tells us, Sakya Pandita took exception for this term. Remember Sakya Pandita? Yeah? He is representative of the other approach in Tibetan Buddhism. So Sakya Pandita criticized this expression, inevitable effectiveness of virtue and non-virtue. And so here, in part, Chodra's commentary is responding to Sakya Pandita's complaints about this idea of the inevitable effectiveness of virtue and non-virtue. Now, I can say that, the gist of, I hope I'm not misrepresenting Sakya Pandita, but I think the gist of Sakya Pandita's complaints about this expression, the inevitable effectiveness of virtue and non-virtue, I think from Sakya Pandita's standpoint, he is saying, this almost sounds like you don't remember emptiness. Because one understanding is like, if things are empty of inherent existence, if things are empty of an essence, then anything is possible. But here, the inevitable effectiveness of virtue and non-virtue sounds so solid. It's almost like Sakya Pandita says, have you forgotten that in essence is empty? Of course, Kyobpa Rinpoche will say, no, I have not forgotten that. But, so then Kyobpa Rinpoche's response to Sakya Pandita would be like, but if you talk, if you talk irresponsibly and give confused sentient beings the impression that virtue can turn into non-virtue, non-virtue can turn into virtue, then that's a very dangerous thing to be saying. And so, I think, my understanding of the two viewpoints would be like this. Because, and in fact, Sakya Pandita, in his clear differentiation on page 52, actually says, white actions may ripen into black results, and black actions may ripen into white results. Now, of course, Kyobpa Rinpoche is senior to Sakya Pandita and never saw this, If Kyobpa Rinpoche saw this, I think Kyobpa Rinpoche would respond very strongly and say, wait. This is very dangerous to speak like this. And here, Sakya Pandita actually is not the exception. Sakya Pandita, in many ways, inherited a long history of Buddhist scholarship that developed in Nalanda, where all these Buddhist teachers and students, really dissected everything and compiled everything and compared everything, And in these discussions about karma, they come up with things like, propelling force and ripening results, things like that. Then they said that, something might be propelled by a virtuous thing, virtuous motivation, but somehow unfolded in undesirable results. So they came up with many of these different terms and different frameworks and different structure. From one perspective, I can say, oh, okay, they are thinking through all these difficulties. It's almost like, you could say at Nalanda, you know, they did not have a searchable, you know, e-texts. But even with that, you know, they have a lot of people reading a lot of things, and they're bringing all that they perceive as contradictions together, and then they have to figure out the contradictions, and they came up with frameworks and rubrics, right, and organizational schemes in order to make sense of all the different things that the Buddha supposedly said. So they came up with these classifications and terms and terminologies and categories and all of that. And Sakya Pandita is coming from that tradition. I'm sure when he wrote something like this, you know, white actions may ripen into black results, and black actions may ripen into white results. He can quote stories, you know, from the Jatakas or places like that, to say, look, you know, this is possible. But again, I think Kyobpa Rinpoche would respond by saying, yeah, your categories are kind of nice. Your differentiations are kind of clear. Yes, you can quote here, you can quote there. But if you don't understand the fundamental principle, then you're going to get lost. You're going to lose your way in all these conceptual frameworks that you come up with to try to understand what the Buddha is teaching. I use this quote, you know, from the founder of the Audubon Society, you know, the bird watching. And a bird watching Bible, right? Every bird in North America is pictured there, their natural habitat, you know, what they like, what they don't like, you know, all those things, you know. And he famously said, you know, and that book, you know, in his lifetime became so famous. But he famously also said, you know, between the book and the bird that you're going to see in the bush, he says, trust the bird. Trust the bird. I would say, you know, this will be the Gongchik response to all this scholarship, to all this dissecting, to all these classifications. Between the book and the bird, trust the bird. Another saying, you know, there are no lines in nature. For our own understanding of what we're experiencing out there, we come up with categories: mammals, reptilians, right? Amphibians. But in nature, you know, this doesn't exist. It's only our conceptual layover on what is. Not that they are useless. Oh my goodness, you know, they have helped so much. Conversely, you can also use that information to harm, for sure. But more fundamental than, right, categories and frameworks and classifications is to experience. And so this is a practice lineage. Kagyu is also called Drupgyu. Drup is practice, accumulate. It's called Drupgyu. Kagyu is also called Drupgyu. This is a lineage of practice. This is a lineage of experience. To be fair, you know, experience can also be very subjective. What if you're wrong? What if you're experiencing crazy things? And you think, oh, I got it. Yeah. Actually, Kyobpa Rinpoche also warns against fixating on experiences, as much as he warns against, you know, fixating on categories and classifications and learning and yeah. Sobish tells us that Vajra Statement Chapter 2, Statement 1 will discuss this particular topic in more detail, this topic of karma. This idea, this notion, you know, that negative, you know, things can come from, you know, skillful actions, and unskillful actions can lead to happiness. So any questions, comments?
I have a
Yes.
thought about that.
Sure, please.
Could you not say in response to the white actions may ripen into black results, could you just not say that someone who thinks that is not Buddha and therefore cannot see all the...
Yeah, that exactly. Kyobpa Rinpoche will say, even if it looks like that, it's just you are not seeing closely enough what's going on. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So in one commentary, I think this is a commentary found in Chapter 2, Statement 1. I forgot who said, you know, he said that superficially, you know, a farmer might scatter like a handful of mixed seeds, barley and wheat seeds, into a plot of a plot of soil land, but as closely as this barley and this wheat is going to sprout, right? You're not going to get a hybrid. In karma, there's no hybrid. Maybe in plant there is. You're not going to get a hybrid of barley and wheat like that. The barley seeds will sprout as barley shoots. The wheat seeds will sprout as wheat shoots. And even if it's predominantly barley seeds, and so superficially looking afar, you say, oh, that's a field of barley. The wheat seed is still going to produce wheat. Even if you cannot see so clearly. But they ripen together so closely, so side by side, and you might be deceived into thinking, oh my God, you know, I planted wheat, and this crazy barley turned up. I said, you also planted barley, you know, it's just you were not clear what seeds you were throwing out there.
Or maybe a bird came along, dropped a seed.
Well, in this case, in karma case, we say, no, there are no birds. You cannot accidentally experience a suffering that you did not plant the seed for, or accidentally experience happiness.
Okay.
For a seed that you never planted. Yeah, here we don't allow birds to fly to this.
No Monsanto spreading it.
No Monsanto either. You have no
GMO.
Yeah, so there's no God, you know, like modifying the you know, DNA structure of the seeds. So as I pointed out, statement 1 of what is now universally accepted as chapter 1, it's good to read that alongside statement 1 of chapter what is now universally accepted as chapter 6, because apparently in Sherab Jungne's own time, the arrangement of the chapters were different. There were at least two different arrangements of the chapters. But over time, one arrangement gained prominence, which is the one that is here. So the fact that on other occasions, Sherab Jungne apparently put chapter 6 as the first chapter, that tells us something. Or that can tell us something, which is that you could say that chapter 1, which is the chapter, what's now chapter 1, which is the chapter on the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, or translated here as the vital points of the Dharma wheel. So the vital points of the Dharma wheel. So this is good. I like this. Sometimes it's translated as the 3 turnings or the 3 Dharma wheels. I don't like 3 Dharma wheels. Yeah, I like 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel. So the difference is, to make obvious, 1 wheel, 3 turnings, not 3 wheels. And so 1 Dharma that can be organized into 3 groups based on the capacity of the recipients. So the statements in that chapter, the turning of the Dharma wheel, is one way to start understanding the Dharma, which is from the perspective of, with regards to the 84,000 Dharmas, that means infinite Dharmas that the Buddha taught, how can we understand them so that the various positions and levels and who the Buddha was speaking to can be organized into such a way that we can see that all 84,000, all 3 turnings, all 3 vehicles is the one path to awakening. So you could say then that the chapter 1 is about having an understanding of how the teachings all relate to each other. The statements in chapter 6 is called the chapter on view, practice, and conduct. This rubric of view, practice, and conduct tells us that in this chapter, it's actually more concerned with how do you actually implement, how do you actually take these teachings, these 84,000 teachings, these 3 turnings, these 3 vehicles, how do you integrate them into your practice? How do you integrate? How do you implement? How do you take them into your experience? How do you take them into your life? And so some fundamental questions that needs to be answered when you are trying to do that. Chapter 6, the statements are statements related to that aspect. So within the context of these chapters, you can say that the 2 different arrangement of chapters in the Gongchik reflects heavier emphasis placed on practice or heavier emphasis placed on theory. In the end, theory and practice has to be integrated. But nonetheless, we live in a dualistic world, right? When we choose one, we have to second the other one. I have a theory that probably the earliest version of the Gongchik that Sherab Jungne circulated has chapter 6 as chapter 1. What is now chapter 6? Because Dorshema and Rinjangma, right? You all should know these terms, but I'm going to repeat again. The two oldest commentaries composed within 50, 60 years of the passing of Jigten Sumgon. Dorshema and Rinjangma. Rinjangma definitely has the order of chapter 6 being chapter 1. Okay, then you say, well, that still leaves us with Dorshema, right? You can say maybe Dorshema has what's now chapter 1 as chapter 1, meaning theory as chapter 1. But actually, Dorshema also has chapter 6 as chapter 1. There are also Dorshemas with chapter 1 as chapter 1. But the fact that there are Dorshema manuscripts where what's now chapter 6 is chapter 1 tells us that maybe at the earliest point, the chapter on view, practice, and conduct was taught first. To me, this further emphasizes that in the early days of Gagyu, it was so practice-oriented. It was so much Drupgyu, a practice lineage, that even view or understanding is only meaningful if folded into practice. So then statement 1 of chapter 6 is the statement that says, he taught, he, meaning Kyobpa Rinpoche, taught that the Dharma that is transmitted by a lineage, through a lineage, that comes down to us from a lineage, is profound and marvelous. Statement 1 of what is now chapter 1 tells us, the gist of what it seems to tell us is, whether Buddhas exist or not, the Dharma that Buddhas teach is true. Doesn't change whether Buddhas exist or not. Statement 1 of chapter 6, I feel, helps us also balance out in case you take statement 1, chapter 1 too far. See, one way to take statement 1, chapter 1 too far is, well, if the Dharma exists without Buddhas, then I can just go discover the Dharma because it's true. I would just go discover this Dharma myself. In theory, yes. In theory, yes, you can do that. But chapter 6, statement 1 tells us, practically speaking, even though this Dharma is independent of whether there are sentient beings to realize it and therefore become Buddhas through realizing them, when it comes to actually practicing, you are better off to practice those things that came to you through a lineage. Not just any random lineage, but through a lineage where these teachings have been verified and experienced and realized and then passed down. To me, this is the gist of what statement 1 of chapter 6 is saying, especially read alongside chapter 1, statement 1. Likewise, I think statement 1 of chapter 6, if you read it, independent of statement 1 of chapter 1, you can also go in the direction of becoming a fundamentalist, so to say. This what you're saying, there's no lineage, wrong, definitely wrong. Someone's telling you, but I experience it this way. Oh, wrong. Then we're going too far, I mean, it could be wrong, I don't know. But if instantly we just say, this did not come from a lineage, wrong. Chapter 1, statement 1 says, the truth that Buddhists realize is independent of whether there are Buddhas to teach them or not. In other words, whether there is a lineage or not, right? As much as lineage, practically speaking, is marvelous and important, also don't go so far. So to me, these two statements, really good when we read them together. They balance each other out so that they correct the excesses that might turn up, if you take any of these statements and kind of misunderstand them. Sherab Jungne's commentary on this gives us some examples of, in his time, or at least fresh in the memory of his times, which is 17th century, some of the more kind of outrageous Dharma traditions that claim like, this fell from the sky, this was discovered in the river. There was a lot of things like that. So it was a very active time in the things popping up, I remember one of my professors in graduate school, and his specialty was in Longchenpa, which is this great Nyingma master, Longchenpa. And of course, Nyingma has a lot of Dharma traditions, treasure, these sky dharmas, earth dharmas, mind dharmas. And superficially, it looks like, Kyobpa Rinpoche is criticizing dharmas, because see the sentence, the line above the bolded in 6.1, it says, some claim the dharmas that appear without transmission lineage and earth teachings, space teachings, and treasure teachings to be profound and amazing. So as Sobish will in his note says, some people use this to say, see, Jigten Sumgon is against all this Nyingma Dharma stuff. But actually, it's not like that. Rigzin Chodra himself was an heir and a transmitter of many dharmas, for one. Jigten Sumgon himself also practiced dharmas. But nonetheless, just because there are valid dharmas doesn't mean there aren't, fake dharmas, outrageous claims, that, I discovered this, I discovered that. And so anyway, I was saying that professor, when we were studying, Longchenpa and Longchenpa's context and the history of what was going on and all these dharmas and this and that, and then he said, this professor, David Germano, he said, yeah, and so whatever New Age stuff that we are seeing today, He says, whatever wacky New Age stuff, that you think is crazy, I can tell you, in the period that we're talking about, 11th, 12th century Tibet, even wackier things were circulated and saying, oh, this is some special Dharma, this is some special, he says, whatever thing, he says, so therefore, he says, whatever New Age stuff that people are talking about today, he said, I can, for every case that you tell me, I can tell you an equivalent that was happening in 11th, 12th century Tibet. Because there was so much interest, in spirituality. And so all sorts of stuff is coming out left and right, up and down, making all sorts of claims. So it is in response to that that also Kyobpa Rinpoche is saying, no, rely on those teachings that have been passed down and tested and verified to be effective. At the same time, we could use this statement to become like, again, fundamentalists and traditionalists. Well, if it is not following the tradition of the church in the broader sense of the lineage, we call it. In other traditions, they say the church, right? Like Catholics saying, the church, meaning the mother church. If it doesn't follow in the traditions of the church, then it's misguided. Also not saying that, or we should not end up like this. Just because it is the church doesn't mean that it will be correct. There's also wrong transmissions, Mistaken transmission, mistaken lineage can also exist. But here it is saying, when a Dharma is transmitted by a lineage of succession of teachers, students who have kept the lifeblood of this through practice and experience, he says, that is truly profound, that earth truly marvelous, truly wonderful. Questions, comments?
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
I'm curious about Sakya Pandita's stand viewpoint, a statement.
On what?
Just now, the statement that you mentioned, because I'm sure.
Chapter 6, statement 1?
Yeah.
Oh, he will be in agreement. I mean, Sakya Pandita did not have a problem with every statement, in the Gongchik. Yeah, I think he would also agree on this, because this is like a conservative position, so to say, if you want to superficially, label this as a conservative statement and a liberal statement. These terms actually don't apply, again, our conceptual framework. But I would say Sakya Pandita would say, yes, this is absolutely correct.
Which one is absolutely correct?
The Dharma that is transmitted by a lineage is profound and marvelous.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm asking the page 51. When you mention about the karma.
Yeah, right? Sakya Pandita, he said, there are cases where a virtuous cause could lead to a non-virtuous result,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was his response, Am I understanding your question right?
What have you understand from my question?
I don't. So now I'm curious. Like, I don't understand your question. So help me understand your question.
My question is, because quite often, Sarah Jungne is criticizing.
No. Sherab Jungne is not criticizing Sakya Pandita, okay? Sakya Pandita came after Sherab Jungne.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Sherab Jungne started teaching Gongchik. Then Sakya Pandita wrote his Domsum Rabye, in which parts of it, he takes exception to what is said in the Gongchik. Other parts, he was complaining about Kadampa interpretations. Other parts, he was complaining about Nyingma. Other parts, he was complaining about people that we don't know who they are now.
Mm.
Yeah.
Actually, my question is, because I got an impression from the discussion just now, is quite often will criticize on Sakya Pandita's
This is because
statement.
within Chodra's commentary we're reading now, within
Yeah.
Chodra is responding to Sakya Pandita's complaints about Gongchik statements.
Yes.
Yes.
Quite often we I'm not sure how to express.
Oh yeah, then I cannot help you. That's why I don't understand your question. Then I.
Quite often we just explain Sakya Pandita's viewpoint is theoretical. It's not practical. It's not from the viewpoint of practice.
Yes.
That's what we say.
General pattern that is what we're saying here. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm curious because I'm sure as the Pandita in Sakya lineage,
yes,
and then they are holding a
yes.
This lineage is passing down shouldn't be just based on theory. Of course, it's based on their practical experience as well.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the statement that regarding the white action may ripen into black result.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Kyobpa mentioned about this statement, so there must be some message he wants to point out.
Then you have to go study with the Sakyapa.
I know you will answer in such a way.
No, really, I cannot represent their ins and outs, you know. I can only, even this Gongchik position, I can barely, you know, do a good job. Much less now I have to channel Sakya Pandita. That's very hard, you know. You have to ask, you know, what is the experiential, you know, aspect of that. I'm just saying, you know, generally it is true that each lineage has a particular flavor. I already warned this. I said, this is not about who is right and who is wrong. Although for sure, generations of Tibetan Khenpos and Geshes are debating who is right and who is wrong. I have no interest in that. Who is right and who is wrong, you know? I'm only interested in showing, you know, if we stand on this side and look at it here, how we can benefit from this in terms of changing our own stuff.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, so that's all I can say, you know. Then if you want specifics of what Sakyapas will say, you have to ask Sakyapas, you know. That's the only fair way of representing them. But what we're doing here, again, a reminder, it is not, you know, to show the superiority of one lineage over another lineage. Sherab Jungne and Sakya Pandita were good friends. When Sakya Pandita's uncle passed away, even after, he wrote Domsum Rabgye where he criticized Sherab Jungne's teacher's views, guess what? He requested Sherab Jungne and said, please, can you be the head lama to do my uncle's funeral?
Now, I wonder, is it fair to label the Lananda tradition as a theoretical base instead of they are having a strong practical foundation?
No. You are misunderstanding. You're not hearing what I'm saying. Yeah, what I'm saying is that these did come out of Nalanda. It did not come out of the jungle, Like Milarepa did not come up with these categories. Probably not capable of coming up with these categories. Yeah. Now you are thinking that I'm saying, oh, only books. No. If I was teaching books, then I will say, oh my God, this Milarepa guy, he is so clumsy, he cannot tell the difference between this category and that category. Yeah, it's in the same way, turn things around, I can say, all this experiential stuff, it came from, these mountain people, right? Now, then you can turn around and say, well, is it fair to say, this experiential stuff came from this mountain people? Are you saying that Milarepa doesn't know anything except for this experience stuff? Right? In the same way, you could say studies in Abhidhamma did not come from the forest tradition. That is not criticizing. That is stating a general pattern.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and again, you have stories, right? You have stories of, like we told, Naropa, great. He was one of the deans of Nalanda. And then that encounter at night, right, with the Dakini that says, hey, you know what these words are saying? Yes, I do. You know the meaning, the experience of these words? Yes, I do. Then the Dakini, threw a fit and said, you liar, you tell me you know the meaning? And then he woke up, he was the dean of Nalanda. His knowledge excels, mine and anybody, I can say today, in terms of mastering the categories. Then he had to leave Nalanda to find a stinking beggar called Tilopa. Atisha was at the heart. Atisha was at the heart of Buddhist culture and Buddhist learning. But he had to make the dangerous journey to Sumatra, which basically means, he had to go to middle of nowhere to learn bodhicitta. To learn from a foreigner, which I'm sure at that time, they're very proud, the Indians, Buddha Dharma is our stuff. Look, we have mastered all of this, and Atisha also, learn all of that. But when it came to the essence of what he needed to understand, he had to go all the way to Sumatra, risk his life, make that dangerous journey, basically to study with someone that by, reasonable mainstream society estimation, oh my God, you went to study with like this guy who doesn't even know Sanskrit? Right? It's like saying, like you got to go to Cusco, telling the Tibetans, to learn your bodhicitta. What? They don't even know what bodhicitta, what is the etymology of bodhicitta. You have to go to Peru to study bodhicitta. But that was what had to happen, So again, I have no interest, in judging, who is right or who is wrong, But for me, these stories tell me something. That's what we need to take to heart. I told this story before, many years ago when Khenpo Sudrin Tenzin was teaching Gongchik, So 2 weeks, we had this retreat, studying Gongchik, and of course, he was teaching Nimanangwa. And Nimanangwa necessarily, right? I mean, you don't have a choice, Nimanangwa, I said 2 things Chodrat was doing. One, he wants to present the Gongchik as it was meant to be read, meaning Kyobpa Rinpoche is concerned, Sherab Jung is concerned, which is you practice, you practice, you practice. You realize, you practice, you realize, you practice. Debate, leave that alone. This is not our specialty. This is not what we care about, You all like to debate, please continue over there. Yeah. So Chodra had that responsibility. But the other thing Chodra felt he had to do is, because, for the last 300-400 years, the scholars want to debate this material. So he had to respond. So then he would bring up Sakya Pandita's complaints, right? And he would give his point of view. Now, of course, you have to remember, they are not scholars in the modern sense of the word, trying to explain everything, who is right, who got it right, who got it wrong. No. So Chodra is going to do his thing. So he would, respond to Sakya Pandita. And of course, Khenpo Sudrin was teaching us this. And I can tell you, all of us are feeling like, oh, yes, we got it right. Sakya Pandita got it wrong. Oh my God, Sakya Pandita, what does he know? All of that. At the end of the retreat, Khenpo said, so good, right? All of this. And we were like, oh yeah, But I think maybe half of the people there had no idea what the heck was going on for 2 weeks. But those of us who kind of, are very educated, so to say, in these things, are like, yes, this was really good, Then Khenpo said, hey, by the way, don't forget, generally accepted in Tibet, there were 3 supreme emanations of Manjushri in Tibet. One was Sakya Pandita. But everybody was like, what? We just spent 2 weeks, talking about why he got it wrong. Then now you tell us that he is one of 3 supreme emanations of Manjushri. Tsongkhapa Rinpoche was another one. And then the third one is Longchenpa. Yeah. Some people say it's Pema Karpo, but 2 universally accepted, Sakya Pandita and Rinpoche Tsongkhapa. And we're like, so then we were all like, what? So what are you saying? Then Khenpo laughed, And Khenpo said, at least at that point, he said, yeah, every day, part of my daily prayers is supplicating Sakya Pandita. He's a Nyingma Khenpo, okay? I mean, he's a Drugong Kempo. He said every morning I supplicate, you know, Sakya Pandita for wisdom. And he said, this is not, you know, about who is right and who is wrong. Right? He said, we study these things in order to polish our own understanding. If so-and-so said this view is wrong, then if you say, no, you got our view wrong, because our view is this, 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 and that, then he says, you turn around and you say, but do I really understand this view in this way? Or is it true that my understanding of this view is mistaken as pointed out by so-and-so? So you internalize everything as you learn about these debates. Temple also said, if you were training to debate, if you're training to debate, then of course you need to get very clear who is right and who is wrong. And he said, but we are not studying this to win debates. We're studying this to subdue our own mind. Yes?
I have a comment about the first time when I heard about this stanza. Then I think for me it was very, very interesting, because I talk in our daily life, in our like everyday life, we have here that motivation is the most important thing.
Yes.
In order to, if we do good actions, maybe, no, or the general understanding that if we do something with good motivation, even if it's a bad action, then the result is, or it's not like a bad action, no, but like a good action.
Right.
But when I hear this stanza of Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon that is saying, no good action can lead to a good result, a bad result, no, or the opposite, then it was very interesting to know that even if you do something thinking that is with a good motivation, for example, no? Even if you do this, then you have to be very brave, no? Because if you are doing something like wrong or with a good motivation, then you have to be so brave to know that even if it's with a good motivation, it's going to cause a bad result for you. For example, in this example of the Bodhisattva captain.
Yeah,
no?
the captain.
For example, then if you think that you have good motivation, that it will be very like, we don't know, no? Maybe we don't have good motivation.
Yes.
But if you think, and then you have to be very aware that it's going to lead you if it's a bad action, it's going to lead you to a bad result. No? Then this is,
good motivation will lead to good result, and good motivation using bad action will also lead to bad result.
Exactly.
This is what Kyobpa Rinpoche is saying.
Exactly.
So
this is good to be aware.
Fine-tuning this to say, superficially, you can say, you know, oh, a good motivation, but then it ended in a bad result. It's like, no, the bad result did not come from the good motivation.
Yes.
The bad result came from when you try to implement your good motivation, you cut corners.
Yes.
You know, then that is what produced the negative result. But as for the good motivation, it still produced a good result. So he says, they will ripen unmistakenly.
Yes.
They will ripen unmistakenly. Just as the barley and the wheat, you know, no matter how close they might be planted, they ripen individually without mistake. So anyway, this thing about how do we study this, you know, we can study this as if, you know, we were continuing a fight between these two groups. And certainly you can keep studying it this way. Or we can study it as, you know, how do we subdue our own unruliness. How do we overcome, our own fixations? Our own mistaken views. So, Kimball also saying, there's a saying that when Buddhism was strong in India, it also resulted in Hinduism being strong. When Buddhism declined in India, Hinduism also declined. Superficially, you can say Hindus are doing well because, majority of Indians are Hindus now. But from the perspective of them really knowing their tradition and developing, more knowledge about their tradition, when Buddhists disappeared from India, there were no more, debates. Then they all got lazy. No competition. In that sense. So actually, if you know how to relate to debates, it can help you to grow and to transform your mind. But if you don't know how to be involved in debates or study debates, then it turns into sectarian stuff. If you know how to practice and to meditate, it can lead to awakening. If you don't know how to practice and meditate, it can lead to just avoiding anything that is uncomfortable. You just go into your cocoon of like, okay, I'm peaceful. Again, Kyobpa Rinpoche is clear about that. It's clear about that. So anyway, at the end of the day, like I said, what I'm selling is Apple. So whatever criticism that I'm making about PC is because I'm selling Apple. Then if you want to know what a PC seller is going to say, you cannot ask, an Apple salesman. Even the best, the most fair Apple salesman, whatever that they're going to say about PC, it's not going to be that accurate. So you have to consult a PC salesman. If you have time, But if what you need really, is a computer to get more important things done, then, settle on one and get business done. That one might not be Apple, might not be PC, Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying settle on this or that. That one could be Linux. There are these Linux people that will tell you, oh, both are bad. But means to an end, in the end, you find your operating system, then start operating the system. Changchu semcho rinpoche ma kye pa nam kye gyuche kye pa nyam pa